My name is Sadie Whitmore. I'm 33 years old, living in Chicago, and the founder of a real estate company specializing in renovating older homes for low-income families. It was 3 a.m. in the grand ballroom during the Resilient Women in Business Awards ceremony. I was mid-speech in front of hundreds of guests when the massive screen behind me suddenly switched to a live stream that had already gone viral. On it, my mother, Helen Whitmore, sat among relatives, holding up a glass of wine and laughing mockingly. Sadie isn't a woman. She's a walking burden. Selling houses doesn't make her anybody, it just proves she's too useless to finish a proper degree. Have you ever been humiliated by the very person who gave you life in front of the entire world? If you've ever been hurt by someone in your own family, leave a comment below. Tap like if you believe that loyalty to family should never be used as handcuffs. And don't forget to follow the channel, because what happened next changed my life completely. I stood frozen, gripping the mic so tightly that my knuckles turned white. In that air-conditioned room, I could hear every whisper ripple through the audience, shocked murmurs, sideways glances, eyes shifting from surprise to discomfort. No one knew what to say, but I did. I took one step forward and adjusted the strap of my sapphire evening gown, the one I'd spent a week choosing. A part of me still wanted to believe tonight was the night I'd finally be recognized, that all the quiet sacrifices over the years had finally been seen. But when I looked at the screen, where my mother was sneering mid-laugh, all I could see was a crack. A deep crack that split through the very foundation of everything I had once called family. I spoke not loudly, not trembling, just clearly enough for the whole room to hear. I'm officially giving up the title of dutiful daughter starting now. The entire ballroom went still. The spotlight stayed on my face, highlighting eyes lit not with anger, but with years of endurance. In that moment, I wasn't a businesswoman accepting an award. I was a woman who had just seen the rawest truth about the person who gave her life. No one clapped, no one smiled. One reporter in the third row dropped his pen. I gently placed the mic on the podium and walked straight off stage. A young assistant rushed after me, whispering, "Sadie, do you want us to cut the live broadcast?" I paused, turned to look at her. She was too young to fully grasp what had just happened, but the concern in her eyes was real. "No need," I replied, my voice hoarse. "Let them see the truth. It's always the better way." I turned down the hallway leading to the backstage lounge. My phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, missed calls, alerts from social media platforms I no longer wanted to look at. I powered it off. Sat down, stayed quiet. Outside, I could hear the host trying to steer the program forward with a forced joke. No one laughed. The door swung open. Margot Stevens, an industry veteran in Boston real estate, and the woman who had mentored me early in my career walked in. Her gaze, as sharp as always, now held a trace of concern. "You all right?" she asked, her voice low but firm. I nodded, still trying to understand why. Why she would do that. Margot sat beside me. "Sadie, you don't have to look for reasons. Some people are born to be loved. Others just use love as a weapon." I glanced at the old ring on my finger, the one my mother gave me after I sold my first apartment. I used to think it was a silent congratulations. Now I wasn't so sure. I thought she'd be ashamed of what she said, but it felt like she was proud. Margot paused, then said, "Maybe because she never thought you'd push back. You've spent too long playing the good daughter. Women like that get treated as the floor others stand on." I didn't realize I was crying until the tears hit my hands. I used to believe that if I stayed quiet, I'd finally be accepted. Margot reached over and held my hand. "Sadie, you don't need to be accepted to prove your worth. Tonight isn't the end. It's the beginning. And if you'll let me, I'll stand by you as you begin again." A soft knock came at the door. It was Harper, my cousin. Her red hair was messy, her wide eyes behind thick glasses. She stepped in hesitantly, phone still in hand. "I'm so sorry," Harper mumbled. "I didn't know the live stream was on. I just wanted to film everyone singing Happy Birthday to Grandpa." Then I heard her, and I stood up and walked toward Harper, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. If it weren't for you, I might still be telling myself Mom was just moody because of her illness." Harper looked down. I pulled out my phone and turned it back on. Her message popped up at the top with the link to the live stream. I opened it and scrubbed forward to the part where my mother said, "Sadie isn't a woman." I stopped the video before she could finish laughing. "Do you have the original recording?" I asked. "Yes, on my phone. If you need it, I can send it." I nodded. "I do need it." Margot stood. "Sadie, if you'd like to leave through the private exit, I can ask the organizers to open the back hall." I shook my head. "No, I'll walk out the front. I'm not hiding. Not tonight." And that's exactly what I did. Through all the uncomfortable stares and confused expressions, I held my head high and walked out the main doors. I left behind the dazzling stage, the elegant music, and a speech that was never finished. But at the same time, I started speaking for myself in silence, at the right moment. I didn't know where tomorrow would lead. All I knew was that tonight, in this gown, I had accepted the tearing of my own heart. And in that exact moment, I began stitching it back together with my own hands. I used to believe my life's path was already paved, smooth like the white-tiled hallways of a hospital. Since I was 16, I dreamed of wearing a white coat, taking overnight shifts, saving lives, and feeling like I was part of something bigger than myself. I studied so hard that my classmates nicknamed me the memory machine with a heart. For 3 straight years, I stayed in the top 5 of Northwestern University's medical school. I had been preparing for the honors scholarship ceremony the way someone might plan their dream wedding. I still remember the dress I chose, navy blue, simple, high neck, professional, partly because I wanted my mom to be proud, partly because I never felt comfortable standing out. But that ceremony never happened. One October morning, while reviewing endocrine physiology notes, I got a call from one of my mother's old coworkers. She worked in HR at the food company where my mom was doing contract accounting. Her voice was panicked. She said my mother had suddenly started seizing and collapsed during a meeting, and that an ambulance was rushing her to the emergency room at Mercy Hospital. I dropped my pen, stood up, and ran straight out of the library. My mother, Helen Whitmore, used to be a resourceful woman, handling everything on her own after my father passed away in a car accident. She was never the hugging type, never said "I love you" out loud, but she was always there. I never thought I'd see her helpless in a hospital bed, lips pale, skin drained of color, arms so thin the nurse had a hard time finding a vein. After 3 days of hospitalization, the test results came back. Systemic lupus erythematosus, a chronic autoimmune disorder where the body attacks its own tissues. Complications had already reached her kidneys and lungs. She would need long-term care, multiple medications, and close monitoring. I sat in the consultation room, watching the doctor list off expenses on the whiteboard: monthly, medication, dialysis, lab tests, follow-ups with specialists. The total came to over $8,000. Insurance covered about a third. The rest we had to manage ourselves. My mother cried. I had never seen her cry before. "Sadie, I don't have anyone else. If you need to go back to school, I'll take out a loan." I sat by her hospital bed, holding her hand. "You don't have to take any loans. I'll figure it out." 3 days later, I filed a leave of absence from school. I took night shifts, waiting tables, picked up extra hours, cleaning at a dental clinic, and applied to a local real estate agency, one that offered fast-track training for new agents. I didn't choose real estate out of passion. I chose it because I needed a job with flexible income potential that didn't require a degree up front. I needed to make money fast. At first, I struggled. Property law, valuation, negotiation skills, I had to learn it all. I used to think this field was for people who could charm a room and dress like they owned it. I had neither of those things. But then I'd remember the image of my mom curled up in the dialysis room, the sound of her groaning when the weather turned cold. I didn't have the right to fail. I started handing out flyers door to door, making hundreds of cold calls daily, listing foreclosed homes that banks were trying to offload. I stood in freezing temperatures, waiting for potential buyers to show up. Some days, my hands trembled so badly I could barely sign paperwork. In the fourth month, I closed my first deal, an old fixer-upper in the suburbs, sold to a young couple expecting their first baby. Commission wired to my account, $3,800. I took the check, stood outside the specialty pharmacy, used part of it to pay for my mother's meds, and wired the rest to prepay her upcoming tuition bill. I sold the apartment I used to rent near campus and moved into a cramped basement studio in Rogers Park. The kitchen was so small I couldn't fully stretch my arms when washing dishes. But there, I could send most of my income back to care for my mom without racking up more debt. My mother seemed to stabilize after nearly a year of consistent treatment. She still wasn't talkative, still acted tough, but sometimes, between infusions, she'd softly say, "You've become someone who can carry things." Just that one sentence was enough to keep me working for months more. I used to think I'd return to med school after 2 years, but the first year passed faster than I expected. In the second year, her treatment costs surged due to new complications. She needed a new biologic drug. Each injection cost $2,000. I called every assistance program, filled out dozens of financial aid forms, but no one approved us. My income was over the threshold, even though I barely kept anything for myself. I stopped thinking about going back to school. I was too exhausted to dream. All I thought about was keeping my mom from having to choose between eating and staying alive. Then one day, I got an email from my old university, a notice about re-enrollment options for students on extended leave. I read it over and over, but never opened it again. I had convinced myself that dream no longer belonged to me. Until that night. That night on stage, when my mother called me a walking burden and too useless to earn a proper degree in front of our entire extended family, I had sacrificed my medical dream to save the same woman who crushed my dignity in public. And maybe from that moment on, I began to ask, how much more did I have to give up? I don't remember exactly when I started keeping all the receipts. It began as a precaution, just in case insurance denied a claim, or a doctor wrote the wrong prescription, or the pharmacy billed the wrong dose. Eventually, the files stacked up year after year, drug after drug, plan after plan. I categorized everything. General checkups, infusions, blood tests, specialist fees, out-of-pocket medication costs. I didn't do it for praise. I just wanted proof for myself that every dollar I spent, every skipped meal, every sleepless night, triple-checking prescriptions, it all meant something. I needed to know I wasn't being naive, that my sacrifices had weight. Once, after a 3-day antibody treatment left her so exhausted she couldn't speak, I sat beside her bed, placed a warm cup of water on the table, and quietly asked, "Do you feel any better?" She barely nodded, eyes closed, voice like a thread. "Still breathing." I smiled, unsure if it was from relief or sorrow. Every time she survived a bad spell, I filed that round of treatment more carefully, like each binder was a timestamp proving she was still alive, that I was still doing something right. In my tiny apartment with just enough space for a bed, a desk, and a worn-out bookshelf, I kept one gray metal cabinet. Inside were the things no one ever saw. 5 years of my life, compressed into names of drugs and dollar amounts. Some prescriptions had names so long I had to abbreviate them. Some bills took weeks of arguing with insurance. Some appointment slips I had to reschedule client meetings for, or skip showing houses, just to make it on time. I used to imagine that one day, when my mom got better, I'd open that cabinet, lay the files out on the kitchen table, and we'd sit down together. I'd walk her through every step I took, not to be thanked, just so she'd know. I chose her, without hesitation. I thought she'd be moved, that she'd say something. It didn't have to be much, just some kind of recognition. But that live stream shattered it all. I watched that clip at least 4 times that night. Even though I knew it would hurt, I couldn't stop. I needed to be sure I hadn't misheard, that it really was her voice, her face, no one else's. Sadie's not a woman. She's a walking burden. I don't know when my hands clenched so hard my nails left red marks on my palms. My chest ached, but not from anger, from the silence of something collapsing. More than 5 years, every morning waking up at 5 a.m. to take calls from doctors, every declined vacation with friends because of infusion schedules, every night explaining to clients why I couldn't meet in person because I was pacing a hospital hallway, all of it, just a punchline to my mother. I opened the metal cabinet drawer and pulled out the thickest folder 2021, the year Mom suffered acute kidney complications and had to undergo dialysis for 3 straight months. The first page was a handwritten list of her medications, complete with intake times and side effects. I had even stuck on a pink sticky note, "Don't forget to drink extra water after the infusion." I reached further inside and pulled out an old brown envelope. Inside was a printed bank statement showing the day I withdrew my entire savings to pay for her first targeted injection. The number on it was $11,635. I had once planned to keep a copy, to show her one day. Now, I just wanted to burn it. I laid the whole stack of files on the table, spreading them out by year. Part of me still hoped, still clung to that sliver of belief, that if I showed it all to her, she'd understand, that she wouldn't be able to deny what I had done. But then I remembered the clip. She didn't need to see it, because she had never wanted to see it. My phone rang. It was Harper calling back. "I just submitted a request to leave the family Facebook group," her voice rasped. "I can't take watching everyone laugh and defend Helen, like everything she said was just a joke." I stayed silent for a moment. "Do you still have the original video?" "Yeah, it's on my hard drive." "Why?" "I want to use it, not for revenge. I needed to remind myself that everything I did wasn't for a thank you." "Sadie, you deserve a forest full of thank yous." I smiled faintly. "I don't need a forest, just one honest sentence. But now I know it might never come, and that's okay." I ended the call and turned back to the open cabinet. I gathered the files one by one and placed them into a large leather bag. I didn't burn them. I wouldn't destroy what was once the truth, even if it no longer held meaning for the person I did it all for. Because to me, it still mattered, not for anyone else, but for myself. I had once been a daughter who did everything, and now I would become a woman learning to let go. The phone buzzed just as the clock ticked past 2 a.m. I was still awake, though the lights had been off for hours. The apartment was filled only with the hum of the ceiling fan and the quiet beat of my heart, the only thing that reminded me I was still alive. The screen showed the caller, Harper. Harper used to be the troublemaker of the extended family, dyed her hair green, once got suspended for spray painting graffiti on the school bulletin board. People used to whisper she was just like her mom, a woman also branded rebellious, who had moved to Arizona when Harper was still a kid. I never imagined growing close to Harper until this call. I picked up, but before I could speak, her voice came through shaky, scared, and choked. "I'm sorry, Sadie. I didn't mean for the live stream to turn on." I said nothing, feeling a tightness in my chest. I was just trying to record everyone singing happy birthday to Grandpa. And then she said that right in front of everyone, and her voice cracked like someone who had just witnessed an accident she couldn't stop. I could hear her footsteps hurrying down a hallway, her breathing uneven, the slam of a door trying to shut out the world. I stayed calm, though my throat was dry. "Do you still have the original?" "Yes, it's on my phone. I also saved a copy on my laptop. If you want, send it to me," I said, my voice soft but steady. "Not for revenge. I just need to see it. All of it." Harper went quiet for a few seconds, then whispered. I watched that clip over and over. I couldn't believe it. Everyone around her just laughed, like it was normal. I felt sick. I closed my eyes. Faces flickered through my mind. Aunt Susan with her pearl necklace. Uncle Ray, who loved bragging about his Ivy League daughter. Aunt Monica, the one who once messaged me, "Be patient. Your mom's old. She can't control what she says anymore." None of them spoke up. They laughed along, or sat silently. "Harper," I said slowly, "you did the right thing. The others, they chose silence, and sometimes silence is complicity." On the other end, Harper exhaled. A moment later, she sent me the file by email. Attached was a simple message. "No matter what happens, I'm on your side." I didn't open the clip right away. I just stared at the file name. Sadie, clip, full, raw, MOV. I sat there for over 10 minutes, doing nothing. Not crying, not shaking, not screaming in rage. Just sitting in the dark, weighed down by something nameless, a mix of loss and clarity. I used to think Harper was the rebellious cousin. Now I saw her as the only one clear-eyed enough to recognize the truth without needing to dress it up. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Proof. I placed the video file there, along with the digital copies of the medical expense records I had previously scanned. Every receipt, every treatment breakdown, every handwritten note I used to mark medication times. I added a photo of the nursing school acceptance letter from last year, the one I never replied to. All of it, saved in one place. Part of me feared I'd need it someday. Another part wanted to remind myself. I didn't imagine my sacrifices. I lived them, loved through them, and endured them. The next morning, Harper came over. She wore a gray hoodie, hair tied up, holding a warm box of breakfast sandwiches. "I figured you hadn't eaten yet," she said softly, handing it to me without waiting for thanks. We sat across from each other in the small kitchen, morning light spilling faintly through the window. Harper glanced around, her eyes settling on the slightly open metal cabinet. "That's where you keep Helen's treatment files?" I nodded. 6 years, not a single page missing. Harper swallowed hard. "Did you think she'd ever look at them?" "Not think, I hoped." I opened the box. The smell of butter and eggs spread out, but I wasn't hungry. Harper clenched her hands. "I used to think she was just strict, but now I see there are lines a person should never cross, especially with their own child." I said nothing. We sat quietly for a long time. "What will you do with the clip?" Harper finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know yet, but maybe. It's time to lay everything on the table. Every number, every word, every truth they tried to bury under laughter. Harper looked at me for a long time. Her eyes no longer held the gaze of a rebellious cousin, but of someone ready to stand in the light, no matter the cost. And I understood. I didn't feel alone anymore. I started with the basics, opened my laptop, logged into the bank account, and checked the list of scheduled auto payments for the upcoming month. Medications, specialist appointments, personal insurance, special transportation for patients unable to travel on their own, all of it under my name. All of it automatically withdrawn from my account on the 10th of each month. I hovered over each line, clicked cancel payment, then confirmed. Carefully, not rushing, not missing a single one. With every click, it felt like another chain slipped off my shoulders. Then I opened my email and drafted a message to my mother's health insurance representative, a man I had spoken to hundreds of times on the phone but had never met. I typed each word clearly, decisively. Dear Mr. Robertson, I am writing to inform you that as of today, I, Sadie Whitmore, will no longer serve as the financial or medical guarantor for Miss Helen Whitmore. All fees, insurance matters, and administrative documents related to her account will no longer be handled by me. Please send official confirmation of this update. Sincerely. My hand didn't shake. I didn't pause to think. Retaliation wasn't a scream. It was a signature. I clicked send. I sat still for a few minutes, listening to the ceiling fan spin, feeling my heartbeat gradually slow. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even relief. It was something unfamiliar, release. Harper sat across the table, reviewing the printed statements I had laid out. Are you sure the total spending was over $130,000? That's not even counting time, I replied. Not counting the days I lost clients to take her to appointments. Not counting the sleepless nights filling out financial aid forms. Harper looked up, her expression quiet. And now what do you want to do with all of this? I opened a new email and attached a 14-page document. 6 years of detailed medical expenses, broken down by year, by category, with receipts, transaction codes, and clear dates. Recipient: the entire Whitmore family email list. Subject line: the truth deserves to be seen. Body: short and simple, just one sentence. I'm not asking for the money back. I'm just asking to be acknowledged. I clicked send. Harper stared at me, wide-eyed. You actually sent it to everyone? All of them. Everyone who sat at that dinner table. Everyone who laughed when my mom belittled me on camera. Everyone who texted me I was ungrateful when I missed a family party. I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, and began blocking names. Uncle Ray, Aunt Monica, Aunt Susan, one by one. I didn't do it out of anger. I just didn't want to spend another second waiting for them to see my worth. Harper stayed silent, watching me like someone looking at a person who had walked through fire, burned, but still standing. Aren't you afraid they'll come back at you? She asked quietly. I didn't send it to convince them, I said. I sent it so they can't say they didn't know. I stood up and poured myself a glass of water, steady hands. From now on, every word spoken behind my back will come with evidence I've already left behind. That night, I received the first reply. It was from Aunt Judith, the only family member who had always kept her distance, rarely said anything, but never showed cruelty either. Dear Sadie, I read every line in the document you sent. I have nothing to say but 2 words. I'm sorry. If you need a witness, I'm here. I didn't cry, but my heart clenched in a strange way, not exactly pain, more like a blood vessel unblocked after years of pressure. Not everyone is blind, but many choose not to see. The next morning, Harper texted me. Aunt Susan is furious in the family group chat. She says you're tarnishing your mother's honor. I shrugged. If someone's worried about their honor being tarnished, maybe don't go on a live stream and call your daughter a burden, Harper replied with a clapping emoji. She said she was leaving the chat. And I felt like I wasn't alone in my own story anymore. A few days later, the insurance rep responded. My request to remove my name from all accounts had been approved. They would send official notification to Miss Helen Whitmore, along with updated coverage details. I added one final line. Please mail the physical documents to her address. Do not send anything to me. One signature. No shouting, no tears. No accusations. Just closure. And sometimes, closure is the kindest thing I can give. My phone didn't stop vibrating for 3 straight days. Missed calls piled up like floodwater in my voicemail. Texts from my mother pierced the screen like needles. Sadie, I can't buy my meds this week. Do you know I need them to live? Are you really going to let your own mother die? This is the gratitude I get after giving birth to you. I read every message. I didn't delete them. Not to hold on, but to remember. The same mother who once cried in a hospital room, squeezing my hand, saying she had no one but me now, sending texts like I'm some runaway debtor. There was no love left in those words, only commands and blame. I used to be a walking wallet, a wallet that paid on time, remembered doctor's appointments, chose car services, smooth enough not to jostle her back. But I'm not that anymore. Relatives started speaking up. Aunt Susan sent an email calling me unbelievably heartless. Uncle Ray left a voicemail nearly 6 minutes long, ending with, "You've disgraced the entire family." And Aunt Monica sent an old photo, me and my mom, at my high school graduation with the message. Did the child in this picture ever think she'd turn out like this? I didn't respond. I no longer owed anything to people who only saw me through the lens of judgment. Only 2 people didn't condemn me. Harper and Aunt Judith, the oldest member of my mother's side, living alone in the suburbs, never joined the group chats, but always quietly watched from afar. She called me one afternoon while I was sorting through paperwork. "Are you doing okay, Sadie?" I was surprised her voice was still that clear, still that steady at nearly 80. "I'm okay. Thank you." She said things she can't take back, she continued. "But you did the right thing. You don't owe anyone an apology." I nearly cried, just from that one simple sentence. Because it was the first time in years that someone told me I wasn't wrong. A few days later, Harper came over with a stranger, a woman around 40, simply dressed but with sharp eyes. Harper introduced her. "This is Carrie Moore, social affairs journalist for the Chicago Daily." I took a small step back. "Why did you bring her here?" "I sent her the clip," Harper admitted. "At first, it was just to get feedback for a small blog post. But she wants to write a full piece. No names, no photos, just the story of a woman abandoned by her family after giving up everything." Carrie extended her hand, her smile gentle but not insincere. "I know this is personal, but you're not alone, Sadie. There are thousands out there trapped in toxic family ties just like this. If you're willing, I want to tell this story with as much respect as possible. No names, no finger pointing, no cheap dramatics." I stayed quiet for a moment. My mind ran through all the possible outcomes: scandal, backlash from family, social media attacks. But then I looked at Harper, sitting there, eyes hopeful, hand still gripping the USB tightly. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I said, "but I also don't want to stay silent. If there's someone out there who thinks they have to suffer forever out of obligation to their parents, I want them to know they have the right to stop." Carrie nodded. "That's the first sentence I want to open the article with." We talked for nearly 2 hours. I didn't share everything, but I shared enough for Carrie to understand this wasn't just a one-time argument at a dinner table. It was years of suppression, emotional manipulation, wrapped in the disguise of family love. When Carrie left, Harper turned to me, her voice soft. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. I just couldn't stand watching them keep twisting your story." I pulled her into a hug, said nothing. I didn't need an apology. I needed people like Harper beside me. A week later, the article was published. The headline was simple: "When Filial Piety Becomes a Chain." The author didn't name me, no photo, but the story was real. Every line, every detail. I read it 3 times, eyes stinging. The response came faster than I expected. My inbox flooded with messages from strangers. A woman in Minnesota wrote that she had supported her father financially for 10 years until he called her useless. A retired nurse from Florida shared how her mother called her a failure for choosing a low-paying job. A widower from Oregon wrote just to say, "Thank you for helping me realize I'm not crazy." I couldn't reply to them all, but I read every one. That evening, Harper called again. "Sadie, you won't believe this. The article hit #1 in the social column in just 6 hours, over 400,000 views." I let out a long breath. So it's probably reached Mom. She's calling every family member to clarify, saying everything was twisted out of context. I wasn't surprised. My mother never knew how to take accountability. But the difference now was I didn't feel the need to argue anymore. I just smiled, quietly closed my laptop, and returned to the nursing scholarship application I had started that morning. That afternoon, I had just finished showing a property to a client when my phone rang. The number wasn't saved, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Sadie, this is the head nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. Your mother, Helen Whitmore, was just brought into the emergency room after losing consciousness at home. She asked that we contact you." I froze in the middle of the sun-drenched parking lot, the folder in my hand trembling slightly. The last time I'd heard that name in a hospital setting was almost a year ago. I took a deep breath. "Is she okay?" "We're monitoring her. Vitals are temporarily stable, but given her history of lupus, we're keeping her under observation." I hung up, cleared my afternoon schedule, and drove straight to the hospital. I didn't bring flowers, no juice, no hand wipes like I used to. Just 2 things in my bag: a folder over 300 pages thick, and a USB drive holding the infamous live stream. I walked through the hospital corridor, where the smell of antiseptic blended with the heavy quiet of anxiety. The receptionist recognized me, nodded gently, and pointed toward the inpatient wing. "Your mother is in room 314, but you should speak with Dr. Parker first. He's waiting in the consultation room." I followed the directions, heart thudding in my chest. When I opened the consultation room door, I didn't expect to see not just the doctor, but another woman, middle-aged, dressed in a muted gray-blue suit, serious-faced but not cold. "Hello, Miss Whitmore," Dr. Parker said. "I'd like to introduce Miss Karen Doyle, Regional Representative for the Illinois Special Patient Support Fund." I frowned. "The what?" Miss Doyle stepped forward and extended her hand. "We're a nonprofit that provides financial aid to patients with severe chronic illnesses. Your mother has been receiving support from us for the past 18 months. I stood frozen. "Wait, your organization covered what, exactly?" "Most of the biologic medication costs, some hospital stays, and supplemental living assistance requested directly by Miss Helen. According to her file, she reported having no immediate family support." I dropped into the chair. "She told your organization she had no one?" "Yes. We were quite surprised to learn that you were once the primary guarantor on her insurance records." I reached into my bag and pulled out the financial statement I had prepared days earlier. I laid it on the table and pointed to each section. This outlines the money I've spent over the past 6 years. I'm not sending it to you to demand anything back. I just want you to know, Miss Doyle, that my mother was not as destitute as she claimed. Dr. Parker furrowed his brow. Sadie, perhaps you should see your mother in person. She seems to be hoping you'll return. I gripped the handle of my bag, stood up, and nodded. Room 314's door was slightly ajar. I gave it a gentle push and stepped inside. My mother lay in bed, an IV in her right arm. She turned her head when she saw me, her lips pressed into a line. So you finally came. I set my bag down on the chair. I didn't walk closer. The hospital called, not you. She raised an eyebrow, trying to mask her displeasure. You're still upset about that? It was just something said at a family party. You're being too sensitive. I pulled a USB from my bag and placed it on the table next to the bed. This is the clip where you called me a walking burden. Everyone in the room laughed. Your words were clear, deliberate. Not some accidental slip. She froze, her face suddenly uneasy. But I wasn't done. I also just found out you've been receiving aid from the support fund for over a year. So my real question is, what exactly did you use that money for? She looked out the window, her lips tightening into a thin line. That amount didn't cover everything. I needed to repair the roof. The winter winds. And the trip to Florida with that Charles guy? I cut in. Her eyes darted quickly. I knew I'd hit the mark. Harper saw the photos you posted on your backup account. You forgot she's the one who taught you how to use Instagram. I'm not obligated to report how I spend every dollar, she said, her voice turning cold. But you are obligated not to lie to the people who helped you survive your pain, I replied. I'm not angry that you spent the money poorly. I'm angry that you said I never existed. We looked at each other, each of us standing on opposite sides. I didn't feel hurt anymore. I just felt clarity. Sadie, she said more softly, are you really going to cut me off completely? I'm your mother. We're blood. I took a deep breath. You were the one who cut first. I'm just stitching myself back together. I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just quietly walked down the familiar hospital corridor, the one that had once been a battlefield for a dutiful daughter. Today, I wasn't that daughter anymore. Today, I was me. The next morning, I returned to the hospital with a new folder. It wasn't a bill, nor medical records. It was a high-resolution printout from a local real estate website listing a newly renovated house my mother had just updated. A 2-story home in the Ravenswood neighborhood with gray-blue roof tiles, oak kitchen cabinetry, and modern appliances. According to the site, the entire heating and electrical system had been replaced. Among the listing photos, I recognized something familiar. A beige sofa that had appeared in an anonymous Instagram story under the handle @HelenSunrise1958. I walked into her hospital room, this time with a nurse and the head nurse present, changing her dressing. My mother looked up the moment she saw me, but I didn't return her gaze. I quietly pulled the printout from my folder and placed it on the table next to the medication tray, turning it gently toward her. I didn't come to argue. I just want you to see things clearly. She frowned at the paper, squinted at the listing. Then her face changed. I don't know what you're implying. That's a friend's house. It has nothing to do with me. I looked her directly in the eyes. Your registered address on the support fund records, the insurance ID, and the bank account tied to the renovation payments all match this property. Don't make me go into more detail here in the hospital room. The nurse paused, pretending to check the temperature, but I saw the deliberate silence in her stillness. I sat down in the chair next to the bed, slowly. I'm not bitter, not angry, not looking for revenge, but I won't keep playing the sacrificial role just so others can claim victimhood. My mother turned her head toward the window, her voice low and drawn. I never asked you to sacrifice anything. You chose that path yourself. I nodded. You're right, I chose. I chose to love. But love is not a license for manipulation. She still wouldn't look at me. Her hand trembled slightly, though I couldn't tell if it was from genuine emotion or part of a well-rehearsed act. The head nurse stood up, folding her hands in front of her. We'll step out for a few minutes. Sounds like you two need some privacy. I nodded to her. As soon as they left, my mother turned back, her gaze shifting from gloomy to sharp. You did all this just to smear me? I paused for a few seconds, then answered calmly. No, I did it because I'm done living inside a version of the truth that only you get to write. She inhaled deeply, her eyes slightly reddening. I raised you alone, gave up my youth. Do you think I never sacrificed anything? I leaned forward slightly. You did sacrifice, and I was grateful. But when a mother uses her sacrifice to demand lifelong, unconditional loyalty, that's not love, that's control. The room was so quiet I could hear the beeping of the heart monitor. I opened my bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a letter from the support fund, originally sent to my old address, returned, and forwarded. I placed it on the table, my voice softer. This is the confirmation letter stating that you received a total of $38,200 in aid, not including equipment and living assistance. I just want you to read it carefully. No explanations needed, no apologies. Just acknowledge to yourself that I was never the one who walked away. My mother said nothing. I stood up, walked toward the door. I won't be coming back. From now on, everything will be up to you. If you need medical help, there are social workers, doctors, government programs, but not me anymore. My hand was on the doorknob when her voice came from behind, unclear whether it was pleading or daring. You think this door will stay shut forever? I didn't turn around. I just said one thing, gently but clearly. Not the hospital door, Mom. The one I used to keep open in my heart. I walked out, leaving behind a woman who had once been my anchor but had become the stone wall I had to climb to live a full life. And I didn't feel guilty for walking away. I just felt that I was finally standing on my own 2 feet. I didn't expect the article to spread that quickly. Less than 24 hours after it ran in the True Stories section of the Chicago Daily, my email inbox was flooded with messages from strangers, women caring for aging parents, young nurses juggling work and family, even middle-aged men learning how to walk away from relationships that had paralyzed them. I read every word. And something inside me began to melt, something that had been frozen for too long. Not because the support eased the pain, but because I realized I wasn't alone. 3 days later, I received an email from an unfamiliar address, with the subject line, "From the Community Medical Support Program, let us walk with you." At first, I thought it was just another promo or spam message, but when I opened it, I froze. It was a nonprofit scholarship foundation that supports individuals whose education had been interrupted due to serious personal circumstances, especially caregivers. They had read the article, reviewed my old academic records from Northwestern, and offered to fully sponsor my return to nursing school. The last line of the email was simple. Every act of care holds value, even if the recipient never acknowledges it. It's time you got to care for yourself. I sat frozen in front of the screen. All those years I thought were wasted, the dreams I had packed away in a drawer because I thought it was too late, were quietly opening up in front of me, without noise, without competition, just waiting for me to say yes. Before I could even respond, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost declined, too tired of surprise calls from relatives. But something told me to swipe answer. Hello. A slow, slightly trembling older man's voice came through the line. Sadie Whitmore? Yes, speaking. This is Walter Granger. I don't know if you remember me, but I was a close friend of your father's. We served in the army together, went hunting in northern Wisconsin every fall, and made a promise to each other. I didn't say a word, but my hand instinctively gripped the side of the chair. Before he passed, he continued, your father set aside some money, $40,000. He wanted it for you. Called it restart money in case she ever needs it. He gave it to your mother, asked her to give it to you when you were old enough. But I think you already know. You never got it. My throat tightened. I had no idea. I believe that, he said gently. I've kept it in a separate account for 16 years, waiting to hear anything about you. This week, I saw the article about you online. I knew it was Sam Whitmore's daughter. The voice, the eyes, the way you told your story, it was all him. I covered my mouth, not to hold back tears, but to keep my breath steady. My father died when I was 14. I had believed he left quietly, leaving behind only a small rental house and a leather jacket my mother wouldn't let me keep. Now I knew he left me something far more valuable, a door of hope. Mr. Granger, are you sure you want to give me that money? He chuckled softly. It's not mine, Sadie. It's been yours for a very long time. It's just finally finding its way to the right person. I can wire it to your bank, or you can come pick it up in person if you'd like to meet. I live in Aurora, not too far. I nodded, even though he couldn't see. I'll come. I'm very grateful. No need to thank me, he replied. Just live a life Sam would be proud to look down on, from wherever he is. That's all I ask. The call ended, but I stayed seated for nearly half an hour afterward. Memories of my father began returning, one by one, his gentle smile, the rough hand stroking my hair at bedtime, the steady hug as he walked me to my first grade class. I never imagined someone who thought she had lost everything could receive so much in just 1 week. A full-ride scholarship, a sum my father had set aside as a silent promise, a recognition I had stopped dreaming of, and more than anything, the feeling that, after all these years, I no longer had to rescue myself alone. I returned to campus on a September morning when the leaves were beginning to turn and a soft mist clung to the old stone steps. A sign that read "Welcome Accelerated Nursing Students" stood near the front gate, its pale blue lettering like a quiet greeting for those starting again mid-journey. I pulled my backpack strap tighter over my shoulder, stepping into the building with a heartbeat that was both nervous and calm, the kind that only comes when you've lost everything and finally know how to begin again. The classroom was no longer filled with 18-year-olds, eyes full of hope and hands still carrying the marks of high school notes. Here were people like me, those who had once set their dreams aside because life demanded something more urgent. Some had been firefighters, some had been single moms, some, like me, had worked another job to care for their mother and were now back to learn how to care for themselves. The schedule was packed, lectures mixed with hands-on practice, exams squeezed between lab sessions, but I never complained. On some evenings, I left class after the sun had already set, rushing straight to a guest house that was on the market to hand off the keys to an agent covering the last showing of the day. On days I wasn't running between lecture halls and real estate appointments, I stayed at the library late, studying with classmates, most of them a good 10 years younger than me. They called me Miss Sadie, with easy warmth, and I was relieved I didn't have to explain anything more. Real estate was still part of my life, just at a slower pace. I no longer took on 12 clients a week or stayed up until 2 a.m. just to finish paperwork. I chose clients carefully, now people who needed a space to start over, like I did. I hired an assistant, a freshman marketing major named Eli Quick, honest and not one to ask too many questions. We worked well together, and for the first time, I knew how to keep something for myself instead of giving it all away. The old article about me still made its rounds on social media. Occasionally, someone would recognize me at a coffee shop or an industry seminar. Some sent handwritten letters. Others emailed to say they'd reclaimed their role as father, mother, or child just because they had read my story. In October, I was invited to attend the Women Who Lead ceremony, an annual event honoring women who inspire the Chicago community. I never expected to see my name on the final list. And even more, I never expected to be awarded Inspiring Businesswoman of the Year. I stood on stage, holding the framed certificate that felt heavy in my hands. In the audience, Harper sat misty-eyed, whispering over and over, "I'm so proud of you." I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because I had cried for so many years already. Now was the time to let the dream live out loud in silence, stronger than any applause. A few weeks after the ceremony, I received a strange envelope, the handwriting shaky and uneven, with no return address. I knew who it was from after the first line. "Sadie, I'm not good at writing letters, but I think it's time to ask you one thing. Do I still get to be called your mother?" No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a loaded question, as if that title was something my mother had the right to claim back after all those years of breaking it. I folded the letter. I didn't tear it, didn't hide it. I had it framed in the same kind of rustic wooden frame I used to preserve old photos of my father. I hung it next to the plaque that read Inspiring Businesswoman of the Year. Not because I cherished it, but to remind myself. Forgiveness doesn't always mean opening the door again. Sometimes, forgiveness simply means no longer letting the pain decide where you go. I still hear updates about my mother from old friends, from social media, from the occasional comment when someone brings up the article. She still lives in the renovated house. She still receives assistance from another organization. I don't pay attention to the details anymore. I had played the role of the daughter, the caregiver, the one who sacrificed for long enough. Now, I'm learning how to love again, healthily, peacefully, and without conditions. One evening, after a hospital internship shift, I rode the bus home, my cheek pressed to the cold window. A little girl sitting beside me, maybe 7 years old, turned and asked, "Ma'am, are you tired?" I smiled and shook my head. "I'm right where I'm supposed to be, sweetheart, so it's okay to be tired." She smiled back and leaned against her mother's shoulder, falling asleep in peace. And I leaned into my own dream, and I knew, this time, I wasn't going to let it go. What do you think of my story? Of a daughter who once chose silence for the sake of family, then one day had to stand up and rescue herself? Have you ever found yourself in a situation like mine, caught between the thin line separating love and sacrifice, duty and the loss of your own self? If you have, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. I believe every story has value, and maybe, just maybe, yours will be the light someone else needs while walking through the dark. And if stories like this speak to something deep within you, stories about family, hurt, healing, and quiet strength, hit that follow button. We've got more journeys to share, each one a piece of real life. And who knows, you might just find your own reflection in one of them.